InvestorIdeas.com podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcasts. In today's podcast, going to be looking at a few public as well as private company announcements, looking at the Green Organic Dutchman's Holding Limited, trading on the TSX as TGOD and the OTC as TGODF. Also looking at Gage Growth Corporation, a leading high-quality craft cannabis brand in Michigan, as well as the ArcView Group, as well and the National Cannabis Industry Association. Also looking at Aurora Cannabis Incorporated, trading on the New York Stock Exchange and TSX as ACB. Neptune Wellness Solutions Incorporated, trading on the NASDAQ and the TSX as NEPT. And finally, looking at Neuraxapharm Group. So starting with the Green Organic Dutchman's Holding Limited, who announced the launch of Ripple Gummies by TGOD, Canada's first cannabis-infused confectionery product to offer a scientifically validated 15-minute onset. Now, they will initially be available in Alberta, BC, and Manitoba, with plans to expand distribution across the country once provincial listings are received. Now, Ripple Gummies are made using certified organically grown cannabis, real fruit juice, and all-natural flavors and colors. And each pack contains 2 precisely dosed 5 mg THC gummies for a total of 10 mg, the maximum allowed under the Canada's Cannabis Act. Now, Ripple Gummies leverage the same fast-acting proprietary technology used in quick-dissolving Ripple powder, which has rapidly become one of the top-selling SKUs within the cannabis beverage category due to its scientifically validated 15-minute onset, a first in Canada. Now, Canadian cannabis consumers love our quick-dissolving Ripple powder for its proven dose-controlled delivery mechanism, and it offers a fast-acting, more standardized, and discreet alternative to most products currently on the market. Now, with Ripple Gummies, we are bringing to market another proven product which has been a top seller where sold in the U.S., commented Sean Bovington, the TGOD's Chief Financial Officer and Interim Chief Executive Officer. Ripple Gummies offer another convenient option for Canadians to consume their desired dose of cannabinoids with a unique, predictable onset of action. Now, as part of the licensing agreement with Stillwater, TGOD plans to further expand its Ripple offering with additional flavors, Honey Infusion CBD and Mango Balance, scheduled to launch in the second quarter of 2021. Green Organic Dutchman launching their new gummies. I do like that they're focusing on having a scientifically validated onset time. I've talked about that a lot in the past, and there was a lot of products that were kind of coming down the pipeline that seemed like they were going to have this sort of consistent onset, and eventually even some companies working towards having a specific offset time. But so far you haven't seen as many of these products actually hit shelves, at least in the Canadian market. There's a little more variety of this in the U.S. markets, in specific states, but within Canada, you're still seeing, I wouldn't say inconsistency with a lot of the beverages and edibles that are out there as far as how fast they react with you, but not a scientifically validated 15-minute onset time. And that is going to be something that more and more consumers are looking for. Other things that I think Green Organic Dutchman did quite smart is focusing on, again, organically grown cannabis is now starting to actually pay off for them as a company. You're starting to see more and more consumer demand for organically grown cannabis and organically certified cannabis. And then also using real fruit juice, all natural flavors, etc. to keep it healthy, to keep it as sort of natural and health conscious as possible. That is something I've talked about again in the edibles category several times, is how more and more you're seeing the need for health-based options. You cannot be putting out products there with tons of sugar, tons of fat, tons of calories, when there's so many new products coming out that are focused on being vegan-friendly, gluten-free, all organic, all natural, no sugar added, etc. And I do think that that's also part of the sort of marketing element almost of this industry at the moment, is when you're comparing this to alcohol, when you're comparing this to even just most people's snack consumptions throughout the day. A lot of people now are looking, especially for CBD-based edibles, that can then replace a lot of their snacking habits that people are already considering opting out of just due to health concerns that have been kind of created from COVID. So I think that more and more it's going to be a necessity for these companies, whether they're producing an edible or a beverage or any really cannabis 2.0 category product. They're going to be needing to focus on making sure that these products are somewhat organic, are health conscious. I think a lot of them would be smart to have vegan elements, to have gluten-free elements, etc. And it does seem like TGOD is paying attention to that. Definitely a company that's had a lot of issues, but now you're starting to see the payoff of some of their strategies earlier on. And hopefully they can kind of get a bit of a turnaround within the next year or so. Next, looking at Gage Growth Corporation, the leading high-quality craft cannabis brand in Michigan, who has announced the final closing of its Regulation A Tier 2 equity financing. In total, Gage issued 28 million subordinate voting shares for gross proceeds of $50 million US, the maximum amount qualified under the company's offerings curricular. And the oversubscribed offering included demand for both institutional and retail investors and significantly expanded the company's ownership base through the addition of over 1,000 new shareholders. Now, the company expects to use the proceeds from the offering to expand its retail footprint, pursue accretive acquisitions, and help position and solidify Gage as the leading cannabis brand in the state of Michigan. We're humbled and excited by the significant interest and investor demand we receive from our oversubscribed Regulation A financing, said Fabian Monaco, president of Gage. Michigan is one of the fastest growing cannabis markets in the U.S., and Gage is well positioned with a robust balance sheet to continue to grow our market share as the leading operator with the best brands in the state. And this is a great first step in our journey to become a publicly traded company, and we're excited to continue to drive long-term shareholder value. Now, Gage is innovating and curating the highest quality cannabis experience possible for cannabis consumers in the state of Michigan and bringing internationally renowned brands to the market. Now, through years of progressive industry experience, the firm's founding partners have successfully built and grown operations with federal and state licenses, including cultivation, processing, and retail locations. Gage's portfolio includes city and state approvals for Class C cultivation licenses, processing licenses, and provisioning centers or dispensaries. You can find out more at gageusa.com. And if you were interested in the potential go public transaction, which is expected to be completed in the first quarter of 2021, I would reach out to ir@gageusa.com or click the links attached in the article. This goes back to something I've been discussing kind of earlier in, or sort of, I guess, late in the year in 2020, which was you're starting to see a lot more expectation and a lot more anticipation of changes in the U.S. market with the Biden administration. A lot of people are having pretty hopeful outlooks as far as what could change regulation-wise over the next 2 to 3 years, or possibly even this year with access to safe banking. Over the 4-year term, there's a lot of potential for opening up and expanding opportunities within the U.S. market that have been kind of slowed down or denied in the past. And what you're seeing now is a lot of these companies that have been kind of on the fence about going public are now starting to jump into the public sector. And again, when we're seeing any of these sort of Series A financing, you're seeing them be oversubscribed to quite quickly, and a lot of investors actually having a lot more interest in this sector than kind of what we saw over the last maybe year and a half to 2 years, with a lot of people dropping out and a lot less companies going public and a lot of sort of skepticism about the public market side of the cannabis industry. Now there's a lot more stability, and again, a lot of the hype and momentum that was sort of lost due to basically a lot of different issues is now being built back up again. So I would expect to see over the next sort of 6 to 8 months several other companies start launching into U.S. markets and start looking for going public. I would expect, again, most of those companies are going to be oversubscribed to quite quickly and have a lot of investor momentum behind them. And it's good to hear that there's both institutional and retail investors, so you're getting a good mix of both for these types of offerings. And I would also expect that you might see a few more coming specifically out of Michigan, a market that is expanding quite aggressively. And definitely Gage Growth Corporation will be a company to pay attention to for the rest of the year once they go public. I would expect a lot of momentum around that stock for the first couple of months. Moving next, and again, kind of continuing the same conversation, longtime industry partners and cannabis research leaders, the ArcView Group and National Cannabis Industry Association, who champion equity, advocate for social justice, and help those affected by the war on drugs. Together, the two groups are honoring the inauguration of the first female vice president of the U.S. through a series of white papers conceptualized by Andrew Klein, the former public policy director of NCIA, and written by a collection of exceptional women. The new presidential administration's pro-cannabis stance is already making waves in our industry and creating excitement around navigating new challenges over the next 4 years, comments Laura Turney, Chief of Staff at ArcView Group. Now, as more opportunities in cannabis arise across the country, ArcView's newly renamed Women's Inclusion Network is concurrently on a mission to bring more females to the forefront of the industry through the creation of empowering educational materials developed by women for women. Now, seeking positive change towards gender equality, Gail Rand, CEO and founder of Grand Consulting, and Jessica Billingsley, CEO and chairman of the board of Akerna, co-led authorship of a series of white papers titled Building New Foundations in Cannabis Industry, Creating Gender Parity Through Ownership, Leadership, Boards, Pay Equality, Branding, and Capital. The papers cover a variety of timely topics and are focused on identifying problems commonly faced by women executives. Our hope is that people will use these as a resource to help them succeed and positively impact the future of the cannabis industry, states Gail Rand. So the 5 papers are titled Gender Parity in the C-Suite, Pristine Companies Aren't Good Enough for Cannabis Capital, Product Development and Branding, Pathways to Equity Ownership, and Pay Equity, Minding the Gap, all by a series of different female authors. The white papers, key research takeaways, successes, toolkits, and papers forward, written by Jean M. Sullivan, Chief Investment Officer of ArcView Ventures and founder of the Women's Inclusion Network, will be rolled out for free download starting Thursday, January 28th, so available now. And the document is well prepared by successful women that represent the perspectives of all women, whether black, brown, or white, and in different verticals within the cannabis industry. The papers will inspire women with advice about successful entry and sustainability within the industry, and every woman seeking to enter the cannabis industry will benefit from reading it and attending the virtual event, said Khadija Adams, chair of NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And so the ArcView Group and NCIA invite business owners to join them for an educational webinar led by white paper authors on February 5th at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Registration is free and includes a fireside chat with Kim Kovacs, CEO of the ArcView Group, and Jean M. Sullivan, Chief Investment Officer of ArcView Ventures. And all registrants will also gain access to 5 exclusive virtual after parties that take a deep dive into each paper. So you can register at arcviewgroup.com/NCIA or click the link attached in the article. So definitely something I would highly recommend looking into on that February 5th. Going to be something that will be very hopefully beneficial to the industry, and I do think that'll give some good insight into some of the expectations we can look for in the next couple of years with industry trends, with probably board of directors appointments, and really hopefully an overall industry trend that has not only more inclusion within this industry, but also some sort of much needed changes that I think still are problematic in many parts of the cannabis industry today. But also having access to a lot of that ArcView Group and NCIA information and having them deep dive into all of those white papers, I think would be quite informative. So something, again, to look forward to on February 5th, and it's free. Next, looking at Aurora Cannabis, who announced that scheduled a conference call on Thursday, February 11th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss the results of its fiscal year 2021 second quarter and ended December 31st. Miguel Martin, Chief Executive Officer, and Glenn Ibott, Chief Financial Officer, will host the call and a question and answer period, and the company will report its financial results for the fiscal second quarter after the close of markets on Thursday, February 11th. So, again, something else to definitely look forward to and check out. Following right behind Canopy Growth's financial results as well, and again, paying attention to Aurora Cannabis and Canopy right now, definitely having an upward trend. I would expect that to continue trading upwards right until, again, their financial results release, and hopefully this time you should see less of a drop-off. I would expect a lot less based off of their current financial situations, based off of the years they just had. There's a lot more hype and momentum surrounding these companies. Again, you're seeing a lot more of an upward momentum as opposed to what we've seen in the past, which is kind of going up and down pretty frequently based off of those financial results. And it would be interesting to pay attention to both of what they're expecting over this next year, revenue-wise, and when they're going to probably be expecting to move towards positive financials, which I think is very realistic for those companies within the next 2 years. Looking next at Neptune Wellness Solutions, who announced its first commercial shipment of its in-house developed cannabis brand Mood Ring Hashish products. Now, these in-house developed cannabis brand Mood Ring Hashish products will be distributed via the BC Liquor Distribution Branch, the wholesaler and public retailer of non-medical cannabis to the province. And this commercial shipment follows Neptune's December shipment of Mood Ring high CBD oil and high CBD capsules. Now, Mood Ring's THC-dominant legacy hashish will soon be available to purchase through the BC Cannabis Store online, the 25 government-run retail locations, and will be available to the more than 300 private licensed retailers across BC. It's a very exciting time for Neptune as we have now commenced production of Mood Ring Hashish utilizing our new implemented and proprietary solventless extraction for THC concentrates. And we believe Mood Ring is well positioned to satisfy the significant consumer demand for affordable, sustainable, premium cannabis products, said Michael Camarata, President and Chief Executive Officer of Neptune Wellness Solutions. Now, Neptune has also sourced a supply agreement with the OCS, the wholesaler and sole online retailer for recreational cannabis in Ontario, for the sale and distribution of Mood Ring. So this will give them a total access of over 700 retail stores across BC and Ontario, with the opportunity to scale to retailers in additional provinces upon securing supply agreements. So I've talked a little bit about this in their previous announcements where they were talking about the high CBD oil and high CBD capsules. But Neptune definitely figuring out the right way to launch products right now, at least in the Canadian market, focusing on BC and Ontario. Population density, also the biggest issue that was sort of facing launches in the past was the retail infrastructure being sort of underdeveloped. Now you're starting to see private retailers and even the OCS and the BCLDB really stepping up in their sales, really stepping up in their product category knowledge and sort of SKUs that are available. And you're also starting to see a much stronger consumer demand in those provinces. Definitely smart at this time to focus on BC first versus Ontario due to COVID lockdowns. There's going to still be a lot more risks and slowdowns within that province for the next little while. And I also do think it's interesting that they're focusing again on the solventless extracts. It'll be interesting to see how that does and fares within the BC marketplace. There's lots of pretty high quality extracts hitting the market today, but you're still seeing a push from consumers as well as producers towards solventless extracts. And I do think that that's going to be sort of the next big trend that you're going to notice. It's definitely happening in some states already, but in the Canadian market, still not a ton of SKUs available. So until that kind of changes, I would expect them to do quite well. Also be interesting to see how the actual hash is sort of received in the market. There's still a lot of demand for it, but the difficulty is sort of consumption methods. There's not a lot of great devices or pipes or items you can use out there for sort of consuming your hash in a quality way. But I'm, again, assuming that would change over the next coming months to years as more and more hash becomes available on the market. And lastly today, looking at Neuraxipharm Group, a leading European specialty pharmaceutical company focused on the central nervous system, who announced that its affiliate Neuraxipharm France has been selected as one of the winners for the participation in a pilot program for the medical use of cannabis issued by the French National Agency for Safety in Medicines and Health Products, or the ANSM, together with Panaxia Labs, Israel's largest medical cannabis manufacturer. So Neuraxipharm emerged as one of the first European pharmaceutical companies to include medical cannabis products in its portfolio, with a business collaboration starting last year from Germany, the largest cannabis market outside the U.S. Now, as part of the strategic collaboration with Panaxia to enter the French market in the first phase, the companies submitted a joint application for the pilot program issued by the ANSM. And the program is based upon strict and demanding specifications in terms of compliance with good cultivation and manufacturing processes, and the quality of the drugs and the safety of the distribution channel. France is the fifth largest pharmaceutical and CNS market in the world, and the country is known to have the strictest regulations in the Western world with regarding to medical cannabis use. And with a population of about 67 million, according to recent estimates, there are about 700,000 patients in France who may be eligible for a prescription of medical cannabis treatments. So, along with Neuraxipharm and Panaxia, three of the world's leading medical cannabis companies were selected as main suppliers for this pilot program, emphasizing Neuraxipharm's status as a leading player in the European medical cannabis market. And as part of the program, the 4 finished products were selected that have successfully met the stringent ANSM requirements in relation to the finished products. These include the oral formulations in both THC and CBD dominant forms, together with the balanced THC-CBD formulations. And the selection paves the way for supplying medical cannabis in the state-of-the-art formulations to the patient, which will allow for the effective start of the pilot program on March 31st of this year. And monitoring compliance and quality of the products supplied will continue throughout the pilot program. And this is going to be for 3,000 patients who meet the determined criteria, and selected doctors and nurses and pharmacists participating in this program will undergo special training in registering and issuing medical cannabis prescriptions to patients. And this is going to be for a 2-year program. So I talked a little bit about this with the other company that was selected as well. And I do think that it's going to be a very interesting pilot program to pay attention to. Obviously, France having stricter policies surrounding cannabis medication is going to be a great sort of test drive to see how other European Union countries who are sort of on the fence might implement their own medical cannabis program. I do think that 2 years and 3,000 people is a little under-ambitious. I think that that's going to change pretty quickly, as we've seen with other pilot programs in the past with medical cannabis, where they started at a very sort of small, under-ambitious approach, and then that was quickly changed due to demand from the public, due to sort of regulatory awareness and even product awareness once many people became able to see and have access to a lot of these products that are out there. It's pretty quick and for them to sort of change their perception of medical cannabis and allow for a little bit more access, or at least onboard more patients, or allow for more exemptions for more patients. So I would expect those numbers to change. I would expect this not maybe to go the full 2 years. That being said, it will, like I said, if successful, be a great milestone for a lot of the countries of the world, whether in Eastern Asia, whether in parts of Europe, whether in Latin America, that are looking at this industry with skepticism, to see that this industry is now meeting the highest regulatory standards that pretty much exist out there. And that might also push in the EU for some countries to move towards recreational, which again, you haven't seen a huge push towards yet, but I do think that's going to change over the next 2 years. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.